teachers of Reddit, what is the most disrespectful thing a student has done or said? When I was student teaching, a senior thought it would be funny to go rip the wig off of a teacher who was going through chemo at the time. What happened to that student? I really hope he got suspended or even expelled. That's beyond disrespectful. In fact, that's just ducking heartless. He actually got punched in the face by another teacher. Said other teacher was standing right there, and I like he did it out of reflex. Surprisingly, the teacher did not get in trouble. When I was in high school, there was this kid who was the class clown, but in a bad way. He was the jokester of the class, but he was also a bully, never did any work, and distracted everyone. He was also very bright. My science teacher tried so hard to get through to him. He'd tell him he believed in him, knew he had it in him to do well, but it never worked. The kid just laughed in his face every time he tried to help. At the end of high school, he'd flunked his exams so many times he wasn't even allowed to take it again, unless he paid for it. My science teacher still believed in him, and said he knew he could pass it if he just tried one more time, and he even offered to pay. The kid accepted, said he was disappointed in himself. He needed to pass to get into college and his mother would never afford it. He said he'd study this time and sit the test. Teacher paid. The kid didn't even show up for it, and afterwards I saw him laughing about how stupid the teacher was for giving him another chance. There was a fist fight in the cafeteria, and after the principal broke it up, the kid he was restraining screamed, "I'm glad your beach wife died on 911. Principal turned red and walked out. Student was expelled. Not a teacher, but when I was in high school I had this little Asian lady as a teacher. She used to give out candy for doing well in class. She also kept all her stuff on a little cart that she rolled from class to class. One day one of the jocks decides to steal the cart and the teacher was helpless as he was easy double her size. She cried. You know he did a bad thing when his jock buddies didn't even think it was funny. I used to be a high school English teacher. Last year I was diagnosed with bilateral hearing loss, and now I wear hearing aids. My loss is high frequency, so my devices are designed to amplify those sounds. This can be painful if the sounds are too sharp. Some of my students downloaded high frequency resonator apps and would play them while I tried to teach. Edit. Thank you for the golden kind words. Edit #2. As much as I appreciate the offers for vigilante payback, I still see these kids as kids, and even though I'm no longer a teacher, I understand that they do not realize the impact of their behavior. I taught elementary school at a school for abused, neglected, and delinquent children the last 2 summers. It's special act, so it's serious business. One of my first grades only referred to me as this beach. Another student I had, 5th grade, wrote about a half a page of ways he was going to grade me. Older students would frequently hit teachers and staff, and cursing out was a common occurrence. One social worker was pushed down a flight of stairs and had bleach poured on her face. A pregnant teacher had a desk thrown at her, but that's more common than you'd think. Always fun at that school. Put his feet up on the trash can as I walked in front of him, purposefully tripping me in front of the whole class and breaking my nose. Administration refused to punish him, but I threw him out of my class and refused to allow him back since wouldn't apologize. Later that year, I was speaking to a very upset student in the hall during classes, and he was walking the halls. He had some sort of tiny but heavy metal bearings that he threw at us, hitting me and the girl in the head. He ran. Administration refused to chase him down or punish him again. Karma got him though. He made a derogatory comment one day about people with HIV. It was overheard by a student whose mother had HIV. He left school that day in an ambulance. Oh boy, not a teacher, but a student who witnessed this whole fiasco, and it still greatly bothers me even now. So about 8 years ago in high school I had this science teacher who just transferred from another school. Let's call him Mr. K. He was in a motorized wheelchair because he was paralyzed from the waist down, and he was a pretty boring teacher, but he wasn't mean. I don't know what it was, his personality, his disability, both, IDK, but this guy was the target of some of the most disrespectful and hurtful bullying performed by students, teachers, and even his own TA. My classmates would openly crack jokes about his disability and loudly talk about it like how do you have 6 like that, followed by a bunch of nasty remarks of how he might have it, etc. His tar was absolutely rude about him too behind his back. She would also make jokes about him with the students when he wasn't in the room or out of earshot, etc. She'd plaster on this fake smile whenever he was around though. I mean, she hid it, but you'd expect more from an adult, you know? And then some asshole stuck a menstrual pad on the back of his wheelchair. Everyone laughed about it and no one told him, even the teachers. At least, not until he went into the teacher's lounge. But the ones walking around that day, I've heard, laughed along with the students. I wasn't in that section during the time it happened, otherwise I would have told him. My high school is weird, so some of my classes were on the other side of the school entirely. A lot of the teachers would brush off the bullying Mr. K received or would barely scold kids for it, and like earlier, they would join in. Some would be too scared to even talk about it at all, or just chuckle and change the subject. It was mortifying. It was cruel, and I still feel like an utter asshole for not standing up for Mr. K because he didn't deserve that at all. I mean, I wasn't a problematic student, and he liked me because of that, but I didn't do anything to help him either. I changed to online schooling after that year, but I heard from my friends that still went there that he had left that school after that year. Literally only stayed there for 1 year, and received some of the worst bullying ever, by everyone. I can't imagine this poor guy's life, and I wonder if that's the reason why he left his previous school. I hope he's doing okay now. Edit. Paragraph spacing. I think the worst is when they seem to genuinely ask you a question about their career path and you spend an entire afternoon pouring your soul trying to guide them towards a better future and later overhear them telling their friends what a load of crap you were saying. In the 6th grade, my teacher took a leave because she had a miscarriage. A classmate said she hated her and was glad she lost her baby. I'm a middle school science teacher. One of my students brings up my husband whenever I try to get him to do any work or shut the hell up. I just ignore it and move on, but it actually does bother me. It's not explicitly sexual, since there are no bad words, but this kid is definitely thinking about it that way. For example, I was telling him to stop some random bullshit, and he goes, "If I was husband name, how would you punish me?" I just walked away. I'm documenting the shit out of this, but I DK what to do, because I feel I'm being too sensitive. Whenever we call this kid's parents, we get an angry rant and complaints to the principals. Our principals are great and support us, but it's not worth calling most of the time. It's this kid's 2nd time in this grade and he's not passing anything. Oh wait, I have another. In 8th grade I went to a hybrid homeschool. There was this guy in my grade who was super disrespectful to the teachers. In math one day he wouldn't do his work. The teacher was frustrated and told him he couldn't go to literature until he did the math problems. At this point, the rest of us were already waiting to go in the literature room and the 6th graders were walking into the math room. The guy says he has to pee. The teacher tells him to try the last math problem and then he can go. I guess he really had to pee, or was just really mad at the teacher because he stood up, dropped his pants, and peed right there on the floor of the math room. A student once swinged a pencil at a colleague's head and asked her what she was going to do about it. Not a teacher, but once a friend of mine got in a pretty heated argument about something stupid with the teacher in our world history class, and eventually he just got up, walked over to the front of the classroom and necked the teacher, slapped the back of their neck as hard as he possibly could. He got suspended. I was a senior and was placed in a freshman computer class for some reason. Those freshmen didn't even care what the teacher had to say or anything he was trying to teach. Literally the whole class every day would just talk to each other or play games on the computer. One day the teacher broke down and started crying, saying no one respected the teacher, and then quit. Few years later I heard the teacher had passed away. I was the only one in the class that paid attention to what was being said and showed. The teacher clearly just loved teaching and wanted to teach, but no one gave a duck. When I was a tar, I had the basketball team's starting center and point guard in my class in consecutive quarters. I failed them both, which made me public enemy #1 for a time. The point guard was a pleasant enough guy, but every paper he turned in was clearly plagiarized. The prompt would be something like compare and contrast two hobbies, and he'd turn in some pristine essay about capital punishment. Every single time. I would give him a 0 and ask him to rewrite it, and he never did. The center, meanwhile, oozed disdain for me and the class. He technically failed by having too many absences, department policy. When he did attend, he'd show up late, slamming the door, as though to announce himself. He'd read the newspaper while I lectured. And I don't mean it was subtly folded on his desk. He would hold the thing in front of him with two hands, like a dad in a comic strip, loudly turning pages. I told him to knock it off. He refused. I kicked him out of my class, and then I spent the next 2 weeks defending myself from nasty attacks from his parents and coaches. My first semester teaching, I had a world history class of sophomores. We were having a discussion about the Enlightenment thinkers. This kid just got back from a few days in ICE detention. He says, "For $20 I'll give you something that will enlighten you." He had said worse in the past and just got back from ICE, so rather than writing him up, I said, "Come on, you're already on thin ice." Then I held up my fingers showing how thin the ice was, about a centimeter. He responds, out loud to the entire class, "Is that how big your penis is?" I stood there a little shocked for about 3 seconds, before I just pointed to the hallway for him to leave. Needless to say, he got written up for that. The administrator's face, when he read that on the referral, was priceless. Not a teacher, but probably the most disrespectful thing I've ever witnessed in a classroom. One of my classmates was arguing with our teacher. They were going back and forth for a while. The teacher was visibly getting upset, turning red, etc. She ended up threatening to send the student to the principal, which coincidentally is the kid's dad. He looks her in the eye and says, "Mrs. Teacher, I literally don't care what you say or what you tell me to do. I just don't care, and I will not do it." Teacher backed down and started crying at her desk. Pretty awkward class the rest of the year. Edit, spelling. Not a teacher, but once in middle school we had a sub, and she was trying to gain control of the class. Our teacher left us a video to watch, and we kept talking. The sub kept saying things like, "Please, be quiet and quiet down class," and this one group of kids kept shushing her every time she spoke. Eventually she goes, "Can you please be quiet?" And they respond, "Can you please shut up, I'm trying to talk." Then she cried and left the room. I was helping a student finish his qualification, worked with him for months, and had just spent the entire day just getting him through. I go to pick up the printing, come back, and he had stolen my phone and ran off. I felt so betrayed and couldn't believe it, since I had all his details on my computer, date of birth, address, bank account details, everything. And there was a camera monitoring the desk that saw him taking it. He was so surprised to discover that I had called up the nearest pawn shop and gave his details that he was promptly arrested on the spot as soon as he tried to sell it. I got my phone back, but he had wiped my entire phone memory and threw away my SD card, so all my photos, videos, and music were destroyed. In the end it had cost me the same amount he tried to sell it for, just to replace phone case, bank cards, driver's license, and SD card. I still passed his work that day, and he was just few credits shy of completing his qualification, but he got kicked out instead of finishing. One of my co-workers was 80 years old. He married his high school sweetheart, had 2 kids, adopted 5 more, Lord knows how many grandkids, etc etc. They were in love. At lunch he would show us the lunch and love note she made that day. He always talked about her, the kids, and the grandkids. Every morning his wife dropped him, and they would talk till the bell rings. He loved teaching and helping the students. He taught 9th grade health studies, a mandatory class, so all the students knew him. One day he drove to school by himself, and we just knew. We didn't ask, he just told us she passed away on Saturday. We told our students, and one kid said she was old anyways. Never wanted to hit a kid so much in my life. That was 3 years ago. He is still teaching. I work as a assistant principal. A student who by all terms was a wannabe thug, after getting in trouble from the teacher, told me I ain't doing a mother ducking thing and I don't give a shit what you say. I said okay. Let's call your dad. He replied I don't give a duck, call him. So I do. His dad asks to talk to the son. Kid picks up the phone and says thanks for calling Taco Bell, how can I take your order? Dad starts chewing out kid. Kid replies I'm sorry we don't serve french fries here, but I got a burrito for that ass. My jaw dropped to the floor. I grabbed the phone and said sir, I'm sorry, but we are going to withdraw your son at this point in time. The father understood and came to sign our forms for a code 60. As the kid walked out the door he said suck it easy and flipped everyone off. He was arrested for robbery 2 days later and as far as I know, is sitting in jail as we speak. As a first year high school teacher, I'm working on getting better with classroom management. One day, we were talking about illusions and what an Achilles heel was. I suggested for some it might be math class, and one kid suggested it might be teaching for me. That kid pisses me off. Are you telling me you aren't going to cooperate? No, I'm telling you to suck my balls. Everyone in the vicinity hooted in unison. It was hilarious. When I was in like 10th grade I thought it was funny if I hid in a closet that was in a classroom at the beginning of the lesson. So I went in there, and when the teacher came into the room, started his lesson, and asked where I was, I realized that no one had seen me go into the closet, and that I told no one about my funny plan. So I sat there for like half an hour thinking about if I should go out or just stay in the closet for the entire lesson. Somehow I then got the idea that it would be cool to peek out with my head and just go to my table when the teacher was not looking. Unfortunately just then he was looking right at the closet and saw me peek out. I can only imagine what his thoughts were, but needless to say he didn't think it was very funny and brought me to the principal immediately after that. I got socked in the stomach my first year of teaching. He was facing the other direction and I came up behind him to talk to one of his friends. He turned around, thinking I was one of his friends, and full on slugged my stomach. I was so taken aback that I just walked away and sat at my desk. The look on the kid's face was priceless. He was one of those slacker types, but he was mortified all year about what he did, that he was an angel in my class the rest of the year. I got an Amazon gift card from his parents at the end of the year and a "I'm sorry my kid sucks" note. All in all, I feel blessed that it's the worst I've had so far. I had a classmate who was a rich brat from his parents. A teacher was telling him what to do, and he screamed at her, "My dad could buy you